Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining How to Open Up Your Spiritual Gifts. So, we're just going to do a little session that's kind of all about how to tap into your gifts. And some of these might be gifts that you already are aware of, that you already feel are emerging or trying to emerge. Some of them might be really forward and a big part of your life. And some of you might feel like you know there's something there, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Um, this is all about how to work with that at any stage. I have been at all of those stages, from knowing something was there and really just like not even knowing what it was, all the way to, okay, this is really big. This is really overwhelming. I don't even know how to like close it down again, and then being really comfortable with it in between. So, in this talk, we are going to go over what spiritual gifts are. I'm going to give a pretty long list of some options, but we know that there are always more and we're always learning more. What we hope to use with them, as in like, why have spiritual gifts and what's a healthy way to approach them. And I just want to say really quickly here that if you are interested in recognizing your spiritual gifts for monetary gain right away, I want to ask you to hit pause on that, because it's going to cloud your entire experience of this. You're not going to be able to recognize them in the way that would be perhaps the most empowering and the most meaningful for you. So I'm just going to put a caveat there. We can get more into that later if you have questions around it, because I believe that we should all be paid for that if that is something that we want. But there's a process. So we're really going to hone in on the process with integrity and compassion and curiosity. That's really the goal. We're going to talk about how to access them. That's the majority of this talk, is really how do we get in touch with and access these gifts that we have within us. And then we're going to talk about how to integrate them into our lives, things to do and some things not to do. My intention for this is for all of you to leave feeling you have some really key tools to accessing, to being able to reach and connect with and consistently be in contact with those parts of you. That is my goal for this. And because it's that relationship that actually allows us to have that confidence and that deepening that we're really seeking. And so that's what I'm going to try and fine tune here today. If you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to ask. And also just know that this conversation could literally be like a 10-hour talk. There is so much to go over. There are so many things to do that are helpful. There are so many things to do that are potentially destructive or harmful or misleading. And then integrating them is just an entire giant conversation on its own. So I'm going to try and compact this into what I have felt were the most palpable and helpful things in my journey. But that also means that there's an enormous amount of room for questions. So again, if at any time you're like, I've got some additional questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Okay. So, I am giving this talk because I can speak to the subject, of course. I was not someone who, I'm just going to give you a little background on me so you kind of know where I'm coming from. I have not been someone who, like, when I was born, I was a medium and I could speak to the other side or anything like that. When I was a kid, I had some gifts. They came in and out. I got kind of ostracized for them sometimes. Being able to feel into others' energy was really confusing. It was really exciting. And then it really didn't go well with my peer group, let's say. So I kind of shut that down. And also that can be really challenging if you're raised in an environment where feeling into other people's energy is a really negative experience. So that was very challenging for me, and I kind of squashed it. In 2019, you could say that I kind of like booped it all open. That was through a combination of a lot of meditation, a lot of spiritual practice, and then some plant medicine, which we'll get into. And then it really came on board all at once in a very overwhelming way. And so now, I would describe myself as an intuitive, which encompasses so many things. I channel, I guess you could say I'm a medium, even though I think that for me, and we'll go into this in a little bit, mediumship means something a little bit different. I identify as claircognizant and sometimes clairsentient. I'm an energy healer, so I'm a certified energy healer. I do that a few days a week, and I love doing that. I also hear light language. So if anyone else here has had an experience with light language, let me know, because we are few, but we are fierce and really confused at first for the most, I think for the most of us. And I describe myself as a spiritual alchemist, which means that I believe that we can transform any part of our life into our awakening, into what opens us up. So that is how I would describe myself. And again, if you have any questions about any of that, let me know. So before we kind of go into the meat of this talk, which is how to access, I want to kind of just list what spiritual gifts are. Because I think that when we think of spiritual gifts, we think of these, which I'm about to list, but there are so many other types of spiritual gifts. And there's something that seems very special about being clairsentient or, being a medium or being a psychic. And although it is special, I just want to honor that a spiritual gift is being an artist. A spiritual gift is being able to access that flow in whatever way finds you. We are happening to talk about a spiritual gift in the sense of these things that we're kind of talking about that I'll list out. But gifts are anything that connects us to a larger field of intelligence or wisdom that we allow flow through us. And so some people have a gift with numbers and they're in a state of flow there. Or some people have a gift with teaching, or again, with artistry and things like that. And so if you are listening to this list and you're like, I don't think I'm those things, these techniques and modalities are still going to help you open up your gifts. Because what we're really talking about is being in a state of reception and flow. And that is really what we're going to focus on. I see a question: to know, recognize our gift, do we have to always be meditating, and how to really meditate and for how long as well? Great question. So we're absolutely going to touch on that when we're talking about the accessing. To quickly just honor that really quickly, you absolutely do not always have to be meditating. And meditation is really sneaky. Some people it can actually be really re-triggering, depending on what your history is. If you have CPTSD, for instance, or have been in certain situations, meditating in that state can actually heighten your nervous system arousal and block you from reception. So even the way we define meditation can be shifted and opened up a little bit. If we think about meditation in the sense of being able to be watching our thoughts and out of our thinking mind, then yes, I would say that spiritual gifts usually happen outside of our thinking mind, because our thinking mind is, we could say, the cloud that blocks the sun of wisdom of another kind, if that makes sense. But we should get into that a little bit later, but that's a beautiful question. So really quickly, I'm going to just list some gifts, and some of them just to kind of give this a little bit of a foundation in terms of what do we even mean when we're talking about accessing them, right? So some gifts are energy healing. I love energy healing, and I think what's really beautiful about energy healing is it's a perfect example of something we all are capable of. All of us are built of energy. All of us have chakras. We also have like latent or secondary chakras, things like our hands or our feet. And we are all capable of energy healing. You all can get attuned in Reiki right now and be certified energy healers. I am certified in Reiki, but that's not the type of energy healing that I do. However, I think it's a really beautiful practice. So just throwing that out there as an example of something that literally everyone on this call can access at any time. You can begin energy healing yourself. And again, if you have other questions about that, reach out to me directly. And we can talk about that more. I have done so much research on energy healing, trying to understand my own. The way we would define energy healing is basically, it's energy as medicine, and it's where a practitioner channels healing through their hands or other mediums like acupuncture needles, or with their mind to the client's body to restore energy balance, which in turn brings about purported health benefits. So it's an example of a type of healing. You can also channel universal life force, which is really interesting. So we're already talking about channeling. So we're already in a gray area of 2 different types of spiritual gifts, which is a theme here. We can talk about what is the thing that we're channeling before we get into the other ones. Some people think it's universal life force or energy. Some people feel like it's their guides, their masters, their teachers, their loved ones, their benevolent ancestors, their higher self, plant gods or goddesses, compassionate star people, source, divine mother. We have a lot going on. Even the Akashic records, your 8th soul, your 8th chakra, oversoul chakra. So you can channel all of those things. You can channel past spirits, really anything. I encourage creating a boundary around that, because there are lots of things that would like to use you as a vessel, which we'll get into as well. But just to kind of get clarity around when we're talking about channeling, what are we channeling? And that's important, because then we start talking about things like being a psychic and mediumship. So you can, I typically see psychics as types of intuitives. And kind of feeling into different fields. And sometimes people say predicting the future. I find that pretty tricky, because I think that time is not as linear as we might like to believe. And mediumship, I usually, and after this section, when I refer to mediumship, that'll be a little bit more about connecting potentially with the other side, as in past spirits and that kind of thing. But for a lot of people, mediumship is when they're any type of vessel for another energy. So that can be channeling, that can be the mental channeling, which is all the claircognizance and things like that, which we'll get into. And then psychic is kind of tapping into a different type of field. The question, is there a specific way we need to meditate to feel the energy? Yes, there is. That's going to be the giant chunk of this talk. Is how do we actually access this type of energy and to feel it? So that's a great question. So I will get to that in large detail. Thank you for asking it. So anyway, so that's kind of what when I say it's a medium. After this, I would normally use that to describe someone who's speaking to the dead or spirits past, and psychic as more of a tapping into a larger field to get other realities. And then there's kind of all the clairs. I give this their own section. So technically these could be under channels or mediums, but I like to just give them their own time in the sun. Clairvoyance, which is clear vision. Clairaudience, which is clear hearing. Clairsentience, which is clear feeling. Clairempathy, which is clear emotion, slight difference from clairsentience. Clairgustance, which is clear tasting. Clairalience, which is clear smelling. And clairtangency, which is clear touching. So these are just some of the different ways that we can really tap into this. So it's really, really multifaceted. There are other ways to do this as well. If you have an experience with something else, please let me know in the chat, and I'll make sure to include that. But it really is quite differentiated. And a lot of people have more than one, because kind of once you start opening it up, you can almost think of it as like a radio station, where we are all right now hearing one radio station that's pretty agreed upon. And sometimes as we do this, we broaden how many signals we allow in. And so we start to hear more signals than just this one that we're all accustomed to. And that's why you start to potentially have more than one skill or gift come in. So does anyone have any questions about that before we move forward? I know I like to give like lots and lots of information, and it's quite a lot, which is why one of the reasons why these are recorded, because you can kind of go back and be like, what the hell did she say about that thing? So please let me know if you have any questions. How do they call someone who do they call someone who can tap into other people's energy? I would say that would be potentially a medium. And that would be, I would say, a medium or a channel. That kind of falls into 2 different categories for me. But this is one of those areas where some people really call themselves one thing and someone else calls themselves another thing, and they might be doing the same thing. So it's really about what name works for you and resonates for you and is able to be clearly communicated. Okay, so even with all of those, different kind of associations, the approach is almost entirely the same. Because what we're talking about is getting into a vibration, a frequency of being able to receive and hold. So whether it's the spiritual gifts, or again, if you want to work on your artistry or your communication or your connection to your soul, and that doesn't even feel like a quote spiritual gift, it's going to be largely the same approach to me. And again, this is all coming just from my perspective, from the research that I've done and in my own experience. So before we dive into the access part, which is the giant part of this, I do want to honor the kind of question of why do we want spiritual gifts? And I want to say this because when I started to have these feelings of being able to connect with something that maybe others weren't able to see, like for instance, I also have second sight sometimes, which is really alarming when you can start to see things that maybe other people can't see. You really, really want to understand why. Like, why is this happening to me? What do I do with it? And there's an urgency to it because it's pretty alarming. And so I want to kind of honor and name that it's a really confusing thing to have happen. And to me, one of the reasons that we have these gifts is that it is giving us greater access to our soul, to our multidimensional selves, and that the more access we have to ourselves, the greater we're able to step into our purpose. And so to me, that was always one of the reasons why I felt a little bit of urgency behind this experience, was that I felt like I had this purpose suddenly and I needed to use it and I needed to understand it so I could use it because I thought it could be helpful. And I think that's really, really beautiful. And that urgency blocked me from so much. And it's a horrible irony, but it really did slow my process down because I started to put my own expectation. I tap my head a lot because it's me pointing to my own mind. It started to put my own mind on a process that was completely antithetical to whatever was happening in here. And I also want to say that if you don't know what your kind of gift is, but you have that feeling that you are recognizing an inner knowing of something that wants to be expressed, and that is completely worthy of listening to, and this process will help. And that without that clarity, you're actually open to so much more because you're not judging what's coming in. You're not kind of shutting things out like, no, I'm a channel in this way. You're allowing what is loving and helpful and compassionate to come to you. And if you want to make a living from this right away, I ask that you take a real beat and do it for a while without making a living from it, so you can actually get a relationship to it and be in service. Now, can you be in service and get paid for what you do? Absolutely. But I think the service, it's really helpful for the service to come first before you start charging for it, so that you, one, have confidence, because you're going to have a lot of people who don't believe you necessarily. And two, so that you can orient yourself to your gift. Because when you start, if you say you're with your friends and you believe, and you have this experience that you're clairaudient, everything changes when someone starts to pay you for that. I promise you. Your own mind, your own expectations will get in the way. And so you want to have a lot of practice ahead of that. So that's just a little caveat there. And the last thing that I want to say is that if you are trying to find a sense of belonging within your spirit by understanding your gifts, I totally get that. And there's nothing to be ashamed of with that. And I just have to give this final caveat before we start really getting into these kind of modalities and the skills element. The final caveat is that we are not supposed to be living in isolated lives like this. We're supposed to be in communities where exploration of this was really natural. The last couple hundred years, if you were on the call in the beginning, you saw what happens when you talk about spirituality. We had someone who was very excited about Jesus Christ as the only way to experience our gifts. And so what happens when we're in situations now where we feel like we want to understand our gifts, I think that something really natural is we want to belong to ourselves. We want to understand ourselves, and we really want to have a deep experience, and we don't have the communities that usually supported that. Most of us do not belong to an intense spiritual community that regularly gathers and explores these things together, which is how these gifts are meant to come about and be explored safely and openly and without a lot of pressure. We're right now in a world where we're trying to navigate our spirituality amidst an enormous amount of hardship and devastating news on a daily basis. And when we have a breakthrough, we feel this need to post about it and to make it something that we get a lot of attention for, because we don't quite understand, or we're not given the means to be able to feel safe in our gifts and to explore them in a healthy and normal way. So I just want to honor that, because the way that we're doing this is we've only been doing it this way for like 200 years or less. And we're used to being in communities that would allow this to come forward a lot more naturally. So I just want to honor all of you here for making this tiny community together tonight, because we're really giving each other that, because it's really, really hard to navigate this alone, because we're not supposed to. But here we are, it's 2023 and things are hard. So I love that we're all here, that we've all had the same experience, and we should be together, and we should be like sharing food and talking about this and supporting each other in our journey. And we just, we're just not in that time for us to be able to do that in the way that I think would behoove this process. So honoring that and thanking you all for being here. That time is coming again, though. I 100% agree with that, Dawn. And that is why these things work, because there's a lot of people waking up, and they really, really, and when I say waking up, they can get that can ruffle feathers, but let's say waking up to their own divinity, their own sovereignty, their own power, and recognizing the systems of oppression that are at hold. And I'm not being, conspiracy theory. When I say system of oppression, I mean things like, capitalism, white supremacy, ableism, patriarchy, etc. The time is coming. Remembering, yes, we are all remembering. And that's a huge part of this. I also just want to honor my personal belief is that we are incredibly multidimensional spirits, and there's a tiny fraction of us that got squeezed into a 3D body. And when I was initially kind of having these experiences, like Dawn said, of remembering, I was extremely nostalgic, which was even more confusing. And I think it is because we are remembering our greater soul. In my experience, or in my belief, we have multiple lives happening at once. We are incredibly multidimensional. And sometimes we have flashes of where we are, or our power and our expansiveness in, let's say, other dimensions, lifetimes, etc. And we know that we are capable of more, and we don't quite know how to, again, broaden that radio station that we are when it comes to getting our own kind of divine information or information from others in terms of guides and things like that. Okay, so we've laid that all out there. We've created a little bit of a foundation. Let us get into how we access them. I am not going to give you certain skills and things that say I have learned from other programs of like tapping on this thing to wake up your third eye and things like that. I'm not going to do it for two reasons, probably more. One, I don't think that they work, and I'm not trying to negate other systems, but I think that they can be a giant waste of time. The very specific, like do these asanas every morning to put pressure on your third eye type of thing. You're not going to hear that from me. I think it's also potentially really destructive, which we'll get into. And then the other reason why I don't love those ways of approaching this is because when you do only one thing, you block out all of the other ways that your own multidimensionality, your own wisdom, or whatever's finding you, or your own gifts are trying to emerge. When we think we know the exact thing that's emerging within us, we lose sight of so much intelligence trying to break through. So this is still going to be a lot of different ways to get in touch with those gifts, but I'm certainly not going to sit here and say for you to go on a 5-day vision quest without food or water. Even though that I think that has that place in certain cultures, it's just not a good way to access your gifts to me. Okay. So my general thing for the best way to start to access these gifts is to get quiet, get out of your way, raise your frequency, and learn how to receive. Those are really big, vague things that I just said, which is what we're going to get into. But that is my approach. And I would have fucking killed for someone to have given me that advice when I was in the beginning of this, because you're told so many things and you can go in so many directions. And there's a reason why it's hard. And there's a reason why it takes a lot of commitment. And there's a reason why I'm not selling you some get woke quick scheme, because that to me doesn't work. And also, I'm invested in you just having the experience of your own potential. And yes, I see. Learn how to receive is the challenge of all modern women. Yeah, 100%. And for good reason. We have a lot of reasons to not be totally open. It's not safe. And so learning how to titrate into safety, and that is huge. Okay. So when I say, let's start with get quiet. This is the most, I think, the most important initial thing. And it's the one that I think is really hard for most of us, because look at us. We're all sitting here on a Zoom right now. We have access to, I heard a stat yesterday that we take in 105,000 words a day. And that was in 2019, which means we've only started taking in more. I mean, that's so much for our brains. That's apparently, they said it was 13 tons of paper if you wrote it all out. It's a giant amount. Like we are getting hit with so much information. And so to get quiet is a giant practice in and of itself. That could be its own talk, and it very well might be. And if you have any ideas of what you'd like to hear more about, let me know. So what does it mean to get quiet? I'm going to talk about the external and then the internal. Externally, getting quiet is getting away from your phone. And that might sound obvious. And watch how hard it is to do. Because it's not just like get quiet for meditation time. You got to put your phone away like a half an hour before you even want to go somewhere. Because your brain is going to be responding to your phone for like an hour after you got that crazy list of text messages, or you saw the news, or you looked at Instagram or whatever, and you were bombarded by that much information. So this is such unfun, unsexy, unspiritual advice. And I think it is so important. Get away from your phone, get away from the television, get away from the news, get away from whatever, get away from the people who are really activating, and give yourself space. My favorite time to do this is in the beginning of the day. When we first wake up, we are still connected more to our dream state, where we're very open. And so if you can cultivate a time where in the morning you set aside 30 minutes where you have not looked at your phone, so you wake up with an alarm clock or something else, and then you are able to just be in your own energy, this will be critical. If you're really going for it, the rays of light in the morning when the sun first comes up holds different energy than the light at other times of the day. So if you're really into the kind of woo-woo stuff like I am, the light of the first morning sun is going to carry pivotal information for you to receive. If you meditate with sunrise, your life will change. So just that alone, if you just hear that today, you will be so much more open to receiving and to being able to connect with something more mystical, magical, energetic, and empowering than, the rest of your day. So that is a really, really important takeaway if that works for you in your schedule. And that's a privilege to be able to do that. So if you're not able to do that, that's okay. There's other things to do. So other ways to get quiet is there's so many different ways that we're going to get into with that. But also, another way to get quiet is to quiet the body. We know some of these. We know that yoga was designed to just be a way of quieting the mind through the body ahead of meditation. So how old is yoga? We know how important that is. That's an option. But quieting the body is more intense than that. Quieting the body is, I'm not suggesting you have to do a giant detox. We'll talk about that in a second. But literally letting your body be clear and open If you think that you will be able to hear subtle messages and to be able to receive while your body is working with toxic substances, and like, listen, I'm not sitting here saying you're not allowed to drink or anything. Like, obviously, of course, you can do whatever you want. But when our bodies are working through things that are tougher to process, like caffeine, caffeine to me is directly antithetical to when I can channel. If I'm caffeinated, now, like a cup of coffee, if you're super used to it, you know your body. But if you're really having a hard time, experiment with what happens when you don't drink caffeine and you try this. Because caffeine puts us into a little bit of fight or flight sometimes. It gives us adrenaline and cortisol. Literally, it's the norepinephrine that's waking us up. So if you can step away from caffeine, or if you can clear your body and allow it to return to its ideal function, literally your brain gets quieter. So I'm not saying this, we can have an entire other conversation about what means, good health practices and why that helps your spirituality. But here's what I know for sure. I have a chronic illness. I have an autoimmune disease. I've done a lot of research on this. I've gotten really specific on what happens when my body is in a state of arrest, or what happens when my body is feeling healthy. And when we're in a state where our bodies are having to work through anything, we're releasing chemicals that will block us from being able to receive. So as much as this sounds like woo-woo, it's not. This is just some scientific shit. You want to be in a good place where you can hear things that are subtle, turn down the loud noise in your body, right? This is going to come through as a really soft whisper for the most of us, unless we do some really intense shit, which I don't recommend because you can't recreate it without doing more real intense shit, which we'll get into. But we're talking about how can we fine-tune our vessels so that we can hear the most subtle of whispers at first. And what does that look like? Away from our phones, letting our bodies be quiet inside. And what are other ways that we can do that? Get away from toxic people. Toxic people are toxic substances to our body. It's the same thing. It's the same thing if you read a terrifying news article, or you eat something that your body's having a horrible reaction to, or you go around that same horrible cousin or partner that you're desperate to break up with, or a coworker that drives you insane. Fight or flight is fight or flight. And it doesn't really matter what the package looks like to your body, and certainly not to your mind when it comes to being able to listen. So I offer that as a really, really powerful way, because that is going to get you out of a place of reaction and into a place of listening. And this is so paramount to this process. So I also just want to say, any other types of stimulants or things, or like medications that might be blocking that, or anything that might be helpful, but you might be wondering about it. If it's safe for you to experiment with it, this is a place to experiment. As long as it's safe and good for you. God knows I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm not going to tell you to like get off your Lipitor. That would be bad. But learn, and this is a long process. So getting friends with the fact that you have to have patience and you have to experiment is going to be crucial. Okay, while we're talking about the body, because also I just want to mention things like blood sugar imbalances, huge. If your body is having a blood sugar imbalance, if you just ate something with a lot of sugar, again, it sounds like I'm like a health nut. I'm not. I'm just telling you, I know this will block you. I know it in my bones. And if you've been trying meditation and things like that, and you ate a bag of Cheetos right beforehand, or you ate a bunch of like sour gummies or something, your blood sugar is going to spike, it's going to crash, and you will not access what you're trying to access for the most part. Or you will start to think you can, and you'll actually just be reacting to your own body being like, because of course it is, because it's a human body and it's doing its best. But here's a thing, while we're talking about the physical elements here, there is a desire sometimes to go really extreme. And I say this without judgment because I did it myself. And I don't recommend it because it was bad, which is things like fasting. Fasting can be real, like it's a really traditional, historical, it's an amazing way to access these spiritual states. I think that fasting can be fantastic. And also, I highly recommend you handle it with care. It is oftentimes really dangerous if we're not doing it correctly. And if you do have a breakthrough with something like a vision quest or like a long fast, you're going to feel like you have to always fast in order to have that relationship. And those extreme things, which can also include things like plant medicine, which we'll dive into more, when we get reliant on those things, we start to get into a trap where this is the only way that we can access the divine. And to me, what I would love for everyone who's listening is for you to have a sustainable practice. And so there are a lot of people out there who are going to say things like, I'm a Kundalini instructor and I love yoga and I love Kundalini. And also, I don't think that's the only way that you can access your energy, your internal energy. There are a lot of people who say you have to do specific third eye exercises and breath work that put a lot of focus and attention on your third eye. You can do so much harm to your chakras and you can totally screw up your psyche. I have seen it firsthand. I have a client his life was ruined the last 5 years energetically. He's been so depressed because he did this meditation retreat similar to kind of what we're talking about. And they literally like blew a chakra out. And he has been suicidal. And he was completely happy before it. It's serious. So I really advise to not try and go the extreme path, not only because you'll get dependent, but also because you can really hurt yourself. And that's not what we need. And it's also not necessary because you literally have everything that you need right now because we're all divine beings and we're all capable of accessing our greater selves. If we're alive, it means that we have a soul and that soul is wiser than us now. And this is about using our 3D bodies and learning how to work with them to get out of our own way so that we can receive in ways that are expand our consciousness and our lives. That's really what we're talking about. So let's see. I'm going to check my notes really quickly. Okay. So some things that are helpful for the body, you can do a detox, like a gentle detox. It'll only help. And if you've ever done any kind of detox, like a juice detox, or you cut out, sometimes people do like a week of being vegan. I've been vegan for 7 years at a time. I've done that twice now, basically. And sometimes that really helps you get clear. You can only find out if that helps if you experiment. If you eat vegan for a weekend and you're like, this shit didn't work, I offer that it may have not been long enough. Usually when you want to do one of these things, you want to give it like a week or two. Obviously, take care of yourself. Make sure you're getting all of your nutrients. But if you're going to try something like that, give it a little bit of time. But getting your body functioning really well and listening to your body is crucial. The reason why I'm spending so much time focusing on the body is because it's literally your vessel for receiving. And if you've ever like looked up or listened to, famous channelers, they talk a lot about how there was a process and like the first entity, let's say, that reached them was like, I'm here to prepare your body for the higher level entities that are going to come in. And so this is a real thing. Your body needs to be prepared because you're receiving a transmission. If you're doing a kind of channeling or something like that, or even honestly, energy healing or things like this, you have to be clear enough first of all, for it to even get in. And second of all, for you to be able to hold. So if you're committed to this, it is a physical practice oftentimes. And so acknowledging your physical body and its needs, if you're committed to it, is going to be part of the process. So just acknowledging that because it is so important. Okay, so that's kind of the physical stuff. We'll probably come back to it a little bit, but some other things that can help. There were some questions about meditation. So let's touch on meditation. The way that I define meditation is a time that is set aside for you to step out of the thinking mind. It's not a time to shit all over your ego and be like, my ego's terrible. You need your ego to survive, and egos are great. We just, as the saying goes, the ego is a fantastic passenger and a terrible driver. So it is a time to practice watching our thoughts, not identifying with our mind, and being in stillness and cultivating stillness. When you think that you're only good at meditating because you stopped thinking and it was complete silence in there, you have missed the point, my dear friend. If you have gotten to that place, congratulations. That is wonderful. I guarantee you it took you a really long time. And even so, people who meditate and have been meditating for decades are usually watching their thoughts. It's not that their thoughts have ended. It's that they're not identifying with them and they find peace in that space between the two. This is like my favorite subject because the mind is, the ultimate nemesis and the greatest reward and all that jazz. So, and when I say the greatest reward, I mean, when we know how to use it, it helps us and is so crucial and allows us to connect externally. Internally, what a mess. So when we're talking about meditation, do I think that meditation is helpful for accessing your gifts? Yes. But what does meditation look like? I think meditation looks like setting aside a time or a few times during the day, if it's something that is helpful for you to do like 2 or 3 times a day, if you have the time to do that, where you are stepping away from what makes you Amanda, Lindsay, Kathy, Dawn, Carly, Ruby, etc. When you're stepping away from your identity and you are allowing yourself to just be. And that is why it's so crucial, because when your gifts come on, you are not being you. You are allowing it to move through you. And so practicing stepping out of this 3D identity, this life's identity, and being in the space of, let's say, I am presence or your higher self or what have you, allows that space is usually what allows this to come in. That is why I feel like meditation is so powerful. It is not the only thing, however, that will make this happen. So I have like 10 other things to do in addition to that, but meditation is crucial. The other reason why I think meditation is really helpful is because you're giving yourself space for your gifts to show up. It's really hard for your gifts to show up in the produce aisle of Trader Joe's. They can, but they're really going to have to knock down your psyche to get through there, right? Like your gifts can show up because you had a crazy intense experience, like a near-death experience where you literally almost died and you came back to life. And that was a horrible car accident, but woo-wee, now you're clairvoyant. Let's not orchestrate that. And this is the way, that space and that presence and that quiet is the way that you can start to allow and receive. So to me, it's literally creating a time during your day set aside for receiving. If you're focused on specifically receiving from your guides or your ancestors, ancestor work is extraordinarily powerful for this. Ancestor work is something that, if you have any questions about that, we have resources about that. I have an amazing ancestor work expert that I can point you towards. But ancestor work can be really powerful for this type of thing. But what we're doing is, it doesn't really matter who you're trying to kind of bring in or learn from, even if it's your higher self. Setting aside that time and like literally scheduling it lets everyone know when you're available. And it really does work like this. It really helps to be like, you know what? Tomorrow morning at 7:30, from 7:30 to 8:15, I'm setting aside time. Hear that, everybody up there who I want to connect with? It helps. And it allows you to start committing to it. This is a practice. And it's developing relationship and trust. And our function and our relationship to time is different than, let's say, our guides and our ancestors and things like that. And yet, I guarantee you it's that type of relationship that helps. So setting aside time, creating that spaciousness in your psyche, not identifying with your thoughts and your identity as who you are on this Zoom call and the email address that you typed in to log in, and just being this spirit in this body is so critical to not only accessing your gifts, but developing a consistent relationship with them. To want a consistent relationship with your gifts, and to not be available for a consistent practice will make you a very frustrated human being. So if that to me is like a really key thing. If you really want this to come online and you want to understand it, you have to make some commitments so that this can come forward, because it's a process. And any type of spiritual gift that you want to be able to cultivate is going to come forward on your terms. Because if you don't have it on your terms, you've got some entities that you do not want to be working with. You don't want to hear them. You don't want to see them. You don't want to smell them or taste them. And you really need to put some boundaries around that. So when we're talking about, even in meditation, we can also just talk about, this is a little bit towards the end, but we'll skip to it now. Setting an intention when you meditate. Who are you actually available to? Really interesting question. I make a whole list of people. I mean, I can give you a part of my list: Divine Mother, counsel, guides, angels, masters, teachers, loved ones, benevolent ancestors, higher self, galactic star family and compassionate star people, plant gods and goddesses. I'm sure there's more. And source. And within those, anyone who holds the highest vibrations of love and light. And I put a really strict boundary around it. And I mean it. And that's really all you have to say, and mean it, to clear it. And if you're greeted by an energy that you do not feel falls into it, you can say, I'm not available for this. And they listen to you. Free will. It helps. If you have questions around that, let me know, because it's a whole other subject. But that is a really important container to put when you are meditating. When I actually sit down to meditate or anything like this, or what I would suggest, and you play with this in whatever way feels right to you, I tend to do some breathing, do some like strict meditation. Usually I do a guided one, especially if my head's already like talking. And then I sit in silence. So I have a nice slope into quiet. I can't just drop into quiet most times. I usually like to kind of have my little ritual and get in that space for myself. And that's a really fun thing to experiment with and try some things and try other things. During COVID, I did the opposite. I went and walked around my neighborhood. I actually felt like the motion really helped me get out of my head and access a lot more. And also at that time, I was channeling different energies maybe than I am now. And so being outside and seeing the sky was pivotal to that process. So it takes experimentation. But to me, something that is so core is getting outside of your identity and the things that make you feel like you are bound to your context. Because the more you identify with your past, the more your future looks like everything you've already been through. So we have to step out of that so we can make room for what is new to find us. So let me know if that is making sense, or if anyone has any questions around that. Okay. Another thing that can be really helpful is going to spiritual places. There are all kinds of spiritual places, famous ones like Mount Shasta or Stonehenge or Egypt. Going to a place that feels spiritually charged for you can be really, really helpful. And some of us are more sensitive to that than others. And also, it can be that you haven't maybe found that space yet. There's a lot of energy in places like temples and churches and meditation centers. That's always a great place to go. It might not be the energy that you like, so you really have to kind of check in. I've gone into some places and been like, I need to live here right now. I've gone into houses where I've said, this is not the place for me. Thank you so much. And then I've gone to places like, usually retreat centers for the most part are kind of energetically really lovely. There's a place in Hudson Valley. Oh, gosh, I can't remember what it's called. And it's where the first known crater hit the earth. It is one of the most insane energies I've ever felt. It was beautiful. And now it's a giant Buddhist temple. So anyway, going to places like that can really help because you're getting charged by the external energy around you. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, ancestrally speaking, if you have a tie to one of, like, say you are Irish and you feel a lot of druid energy, go to Ireland if you can. I mean, how exquisite is that? But like, try going there and seeing what opens up. There are so many ways that we can kind of connect in a really strong way to energies that are trying to reach us by going to that place. Now, I think there's a lot of energy that needs to be, absorbed there, but also when we connect to those places, there's a ritual around it. Think about what happens when you make a spiritual journey to a beautiful place, even if it's a hike to a mountaintop. You're telling yourself, I'm going to go and have this experience at the top of this mountaintop. It's going to be beautiful, and I'm going to tap into everything there. The whole way up, you're planning, and your body and mind are preparing to give you that space to receive. And so if you don't have access to Mount Shasta, which, how convenient would that be? I say that I lived in California for 12 years, never went once. But if you don't have access to a place like fucking Egypt right now, first of all, same. And second of all, creating an environment for yourself and a ritual around it can do that for you. So throwing that out there as another option to make this more sustainable. Because if you can only have an experience in Egypt in a pyramid, it's going to make it really hard for you to do that when you get home. Okay. Another thing that's really lovely is to be around spiritual people. That's why calls like this are so important. That's why talking to other people who get you is so important, because we're feeding off of each other's energy and we're with people who get us. It is so critical. It is so much harder to do this work alone. It is unnatural. We are not meant to do it that way. And if you can find like-minded people who are with you on this, you are in such better shape. I literally created a community that is designed for that. So if you have questions about it, there are a few folks who are from there that are on here tonight. So there are like-minded people there. But whatever you can do to find, so if you have questions, let me know. I can send you info. Whatever you can do to find people who get you, who don't judge you, and are curious alongside you, it will help enormously. There's something called reciprocal determinism. We've usually heard this, like I've used this, like trying to convince my friend to break up with someone or something. It's basically that theory that you are who you spend time with. So, if you've heard that thing of like, your life will turn out the way, the 5 people closest to you, how their lives are going, that's reciprocal determinism. And it holds for spirituality. If all of your friends are not into this at all, that's okay, but add some new people to your group. Because that type of energy, it's necessary. Again, that's why communities are so important. And you will feed off that energy, and it'll inspire you to keep going even when it gets confusing, because if you're on the right track, it will get confusing. I promise you. The more information comes in, the more you're like, what the fuck is happening here? And you're going to want someone that you can be like, Becky, you will have no idea what just happened to me. Do you understand this? And you're going to want to be able to share that with someone. What is that term again? It is reciprocal determinism. It's a good one, isn't it? I love that term. It's true. Again, usually it's like I've used it for so long to be like, and that's why you can't date Brian anymore. But now for this instance, it's true in this way, in the positive way, which is the more we spend time around people who hold that energy, the more it opens it up in us. Another thing that I just do, and like, I haven't seen this anywhere. No one's told me this, like a lot of the things here, but I listen to spiritual podcasts and spiritual books. And I read spiritual books, but I listen to it all the time. All the time. Because it keeps me operating in that way. It keeps me seeing life in that way. It keeps me open in that way. When we listen to something like, and listen, the news is important. I hope everyone here votes and is an active citizen. But that type of thing, and we're about to get into frequency, but that type of thing really shuts us down. And so it has a time and a place and a container, just like everything. Spiritual gifts also have a container. If you are just open and you're an open channel all the time, you're going to get bombarded and it's not going to be good. So having a time and a place, but also keeping your vibration up and listening to these things and not shutting yourself down. So you have to work way hard to bring yourself back up. Super, super critical. Again, let me know if that doesn't make sense. It's so much information because I'm trying to give you like everything I know in 90 minutes, which is it's a tall order for something as complex as this. Okay. So we already talked about the pineal gland. I love the pineal gland. If you have questions about that, it's a lot of people say it's kind of similar to your third eye, your ajna center. Don't push it. Don't force it. You'll blow your brain out. And you can do some exercises for that. There are a lot of exercises out there. I'm hesitant to encourage any of it because usually you're really forcing something, and force should never come into play for this process. Which brings me to, before we get into frequency, which is a giant other part of this, I think it's just as important as meditation and time as frequency. Before we get into that, I'm going to touch on one of my favorite subjects, which is plant medicine. In no way am I encouraging anyone to do illegal activity. And also, I love plant medicine. And I think if you are well read in it and you are able to do it safely, it can be a huge tool in meditation and in getting out of your mind. There are major caveats of using plant medicine for this purpose because, and boy, I know this for sure, plants have their own agenda. Plants are super pushy sometimes, and they have their own agenda. And there are all kinds of theories on this. I mean, but I know this. I've had this experience. And so when you use plant medicine to open yourself up, just be aware that you're not alone, right? It's not just opening you up and now you're in a larger room. You're in a room with an entity, with a spirit already. If you are trying to channel, work with, or connect with plants, then yeah, plant medicine will be great. And not all of it has to be entheogenic or psychedelic. You can work with plant essences. There are flower essences. I love working with flower essences. I find them super powerful. So plant medicine can be super, super powerful. If you are at your beginning stages of this and you know that you're onto something, but you don't know what it is, I think plants and flower essences and things like that can be a really, really beautiful way to start because they're super gentle, but they are expansive. And you're not, if you're working with that, you're not going to be, I don't know, slammed over the head by Bashar and suddenly be channeling for, an extraterrestrial. I don't think that will happen to you. That took that guy a long time to get there. But I don't know if any of you know about the guy who channels Bashar and all of that. But anyway, that was a whole process. But starting gentle and something like that works. Microdosing is amazing. If you need more resources on microdosing, you are welcome to reach out to me. Microdosing can be a fantastic way, once you learn how to navigate that, to access other dimensions and other parts of your mind that you don't normally have access to. You can do things like ayahuasca. I love ayahuasca. I am in deep, deep reverence and experience with ayahuasca. It was a tremendous part of my gifts opening up further. And so there is a lot of value there. However, you have to be really careful with her. And there are places to go that you can do it legally and safely. Again, happy to provide any resources around that. But that is something that it can be really intense. Okay, if anyone wants a super light and fun podcast to listen to, check out Normal Gossip. Adorable. Great. Yeah, I mean, I really love podcasts like On Being and things like that. No, you're good. I love podcasts like that are really beautiful and inspiring people talking about inspiring things that keeps me open and interested. I also am always just reading at least one spiritual book so that part of my mind is open and receiving. And I think that's a really crucial and critical part of this. Okay, so the other kind of big kahuna when it comes to accessing, because to me, it's really about like getting quiet and clear and creating that space, which is meditation. And then, I remember there was a question in here, like, is meditation what we have to do? Is that like the key to it? The other thing that I find to be pivotal to this process is raising your frequency. which sounds so woo-woo. And if you want to eye roll, chances are you're not on camera and you can. But this is super, super pivotal to this process. Because who you want to connect with can only connect with you if you are able to hold that vibration. Now, does that mean you have to have the same vibration as Isis if you want to connect with Isis? No. Although kind of tricky, some might say yes, but you have to be able to have enough of a crossover to be able to access. So if your vibration is really low, it's going to be harder for you to be able to hear, see, feel, sense, and share something meaningful and uplifting. And so that is the active part. You know, meditation is active and requires commitment and practice and an enormous amount of patience and dedication. And off the meditation cushion, let's say, is raising your vibration. So, ways of raising your vibration. The number one fastest way to raise your vibration right now is practice gratitude. Fastest way. Some people love to wake up and write a gratitude list. Some people love to write a gratitude list right when they go to bed. I love writing gratitude lists all the time. My favorite time to do a gratitude list is in the middle of the day because I have found that it changes the way I see the rest of the day. If you do it in the morning and then your day swoops in and then your day sucks, you're like, well, today sucks, but I was grateful this morning. Or if you do it at the end of the day, which I think is actually probably secondly most helpful, but this is so particular to everyone, so you might feel differently. End of the day, you can kind of pick and choose what pieces. I love a middle of the day gratitude list about what's going right in your day. It will change the way you experience your day. It is the most effective when your day totally blows and you're like, nothing is working. This day sucks. Today's a terrible day. If you choose to find the things in your day that are working for you, you have an opportunity to reroute. And I think that it can be so, so, so helpful. So that's a simple way. But being grateful is one of the fastest ways to literally like level up. There are like practices of meditating and literally seeing yourself being lifted. And it's a way to like literally raise your vibration. It's a little bit more advanced and can go really sideways. So you can try that, see if it works, play around with it. You can do it anytime. You could be like drinking, like having a sip of water and literally see yourself lifting, visualizing yourself lifting. It's kind of amazing what that can do. Just don't take it too far if you're newer to this kind of thing, because you can get a little disoriented. And it's not like advanced, but it's intermediate, let's say. Another thing that I love doing that I'll do for the rest of my days is charge water, especially if you are inclined to do energy healing or anything like that. Charging your water, amazing. Write your intention. Even if your intention is to connect with your ancestors or to connect with your guides in whatever way they want to find you. A really effective thing that you can do. You got to do it pretty consistently. Write it down. That's important, especially if this is new. If you've been like really working on this intention for a while, maybe don't write it down. But if it's like under 2 weeks, write it down, put it next to the water or any liquid, hold your water, read your intention out loud. I want to connect to my guides in whatever way they want to find me. Charge your water, hold that intention. You can, if you really want to up it, you make it present tense. I am connecting to my guides in whatever way they want to find me. Charge, charge, charge. And you just have to hold it and feel like your guides are connecting to you. It's going to take some imagination if you haven't already connected. So feel what it would feel like to know that your guides were talking to you, they were communicating with you, and you were experiencing them in some way while holding your water. Drink your water, an enormous boost to your frequency, an incredibly powerful tool. I love this. I do this so often. I do it so often that now when I don't do it, I'm like, I forgot the thing. It's so helpful and it will change your life. And you can do that with all kinds of things, anything that you're intending and anything that you would like to bring into your life. But with this, it's really, really helpful. And again, you're calling your guides in, you're making it known. that you're receptive and available and you're committing to it, which is huge. Again, listening to spiritual books are things that are inspirational. If you're someone who, is wants to be an energy healer, listen to a podcast about energy healing, knowing that you're going to have your own unique version. If you're a channeler and you want to channel more, listen to some of the greats. I don't know, get up on Edgar Cayce, do whatever you need to do. Dive into the people who inspire you and stay connected to that energy, because you're spending more time in the frequency that you want to hold to be able to receive. A really, really helpful thing. Another thing that's helpful is to be in a state of love. Obviously, when we're in love, we're more receptive to everything because we're open and we're like all over the place. But that's really hard to cultivate if you're not actively head over heels in love right now, which most of us aren't. Being in a state of love. So what does that look like? If that looks like, I don't know, if you have a pet, oh my God, spend more time with your pet and tell them how beautiful they are, because they are. Or be around the people that make you really happy. Again, coming back to like getting outside of the field of toxic people. Toxic people will really damage your vibration. Other things to me that damage my vibration, just now that we're talking about the damaging parts: violent movies, scary things. Let's see. Being around people who are really, really not optimistic or hold a really scary worldview. Putting caps around times where you're going to get really rough information and knowing that you have a boundary around it. Things like that would be helpful. But being in a state of love is easily the number one way to up your frequency very quickly. Practicing gratitude is so close and it's so easy. It's usually more accessible. Being in a state of love, you need to have access to the things that make you feel love. So maybe that's an experience where you felt more loved than you've ever felt, or you think about a time with someone that you love so much, or something that they did that made you feel so unconditionally loved. I do a meditation sometimes. It's tricky for me even, and I've practiced it for a while, where I meditate on love. Because I believe underneath all the burdens we carry, we are love just emanating, thrumming through our systems. So if you can even sit and meditate on love, on loving awareness, a very Ram Dass kind of thing to do. And meditating on love and holding that energy. If I could, I would make like a Nintendo, like sign of like powering up your frequency, because you will. It's the highest frequency that we can hold. And so that's going to be huge to being able to receive from the folks that you want to receive from. If you're sensitive to things like this, crystals, earthing mats, all of those are really helpful. My house is surrounded by crystals. Before I even knew that I knew anything really about crystals, I just really liked putting them in all my windows, which I found out later was charging. So I love having crystals around. If that's something that's really powerful for you, that's a great way to raise your vibration. That's an enormous reason why so many people love them, is because they can palpably feel their vibration. Another thing that I do, and I'm like getting all giddy thinking about it, is I always have fresh flowers around if I can. They literally raise my vibration right away. So if you have an altar space or a place that you can go to that you can set up that is filled with that high vibration, incredibly important. Altar spaces, part of consistency, can drop your system right into that place. Really, really helpful for that kind of immediate raising your vibration. And practicing commitment can signal to your body and to your mind, okay, mind, it's time to move aside. Body, it's time to settle in. Spirits, you call in, you invoke them, you set your intentions and your boundaries, and boom, you're in a place to receive. Then you can always visualize what that might feel like, what that might look like to receive and to have that practice. Amanda says, I've never microdosed specifically, but I have had a lot of different plant medicine experiences, including mushroom mace. How about you? Yeah. So I had a pretty intense, not intense as in a lot, but I had a pretty regular microdosing practice. And what I have found for me was that it absolutely raised my vibrations, let's say, and it gave me the neuroplasticity to access other ways of thinking and being. And I think that for me was the most pivotal part of microdosing. Um, Amanda, there are tons of resources on microdosing at Omnia as well. There's all kinds of videos and workshops about how to microdose, where to get it, how to do all kinds of things with that. Omnia is that community that we have that focuses on spiritual practices and rituals. So I think that microdosing is really powerful. I've never microdosed with LSD. A lot of people seem to really like that. I like to stick with things that feel like supernatural is funny to say, but like supernatural. So LSD feels, I know it's still natural, but it feels like a part removed for me for whatever reason, but I'm totally open to it. I know people microdose with MDMA. All of them are designed to literally give our brains the chemicals and the energies required for us to be able to expand what's possible and to get out of our patterns. I mean, really what we're talking about with spiritual gifts is how do we step out of our human bullshit patterns? Not like they're bullshit, like they're bad, but they're the same pattern every day. Rinse, wash, repeat, and start to bring in other energies that can move through us in a way that makes us feel alive and stepping into our purpose and our potential. And so anything we can do that steps us out of our, I wake up, I brush my teeth, I do this, I go to work, and I come home, and then I watch TV and I fall asleep. Anything that we can do that disrupts that and allows our brains to create new neural pathways of what's possible is going to get us closer to being able to access more of these gifts. And so I also see, what if you want guidance? Is that channeling is a question. I think that if you want to receive guidance, this is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to start. It can be channeling if you want to call it channeling. What we're talking about is your spirituality. So if you want to call something channeling, you can call it channeling. It only gets tricky if you're talking to another person and they use channeling in only this way. And then you just explain how you mean it, and that's fine. This is your spiritual practice. You get to label it however you want. To me, if you're seeking guidance, there's a few different ways to do this. Automatic writing can be great if you're comfortable with it. I am not a writer. In fact, writing is just lengthy and arduous for me. And for whatever reason, it makes automatic writing kind of easy because I'm not writing it. I do automatic writing and kind of that in a few different ways. And that looks like me meditating in some capacity, doing some breathing in some capacity. Mindfulness meditation is usually my favorite way to do this. So it incorporates breathing with mindfulness. And then I ask some questions. I call in my guides in the invocation that I gave earlier in terms of the list, and I ask what I want. I set some boundaries. And then I have my list of questions. And the way that I channel, I literally started doing these talks because of a channeling session I had done. And it came through so loud to do these. So here we are. So it happens, it works. So something you can do is you start asking the questions, and then the way that you get, that information down, this is the best thing to experiment with. It's so much fun to experiment it with because you will be surprised as to what works. Like, I hate writing. Automatic writing is great for me. Another thing that I hate doing is voice to text or whatever. I love voice to text. I have notes in my phone where I ask questions and then I voice to text whatever comes through. And it is extraordinary. I read back over it and I'm like, what? It is so helpful. These are really, really great practices, especially, I've been doing this for years now. I still return to it. It's still like the first thing I do if I need guidance. And that is a really helpful thing. And you will be surprised. You will be surprised. If you hear nothing, give it time or just keep asking questions. The other thing is you might hear something and you'd be like, nah, that's just me. This is so important. Say it anyway, write it anyway, mark it anyway. Follow that tiny little voice that you're like, it's just my thoughts. Just go for it. Just see what happens. You have to start somewhere. If you are expecting the voice of God to thunder down on you, you will be chasing this forever. Allow it to be confusing and quiet and like, is it something I can trust at first? Because the secret in this in the beginning, especially if you just want guidance to start, or if you want to test it, is just do it for a while and then see afterwards if it was helpful. And if it was helpful, you're getting somewhere. It's amazing what happens. And you can get super specific. You can say, I just want to talk to my higher self come through. You can try and see what happens. I like leaving it up to my favorite team, like the fucking Marvel Avengers. I'm like, anyone who wants to come through today, if you've got help, I'll hear it. The question of do what, the meditation, the thing that I think is really helpful is trusting the voice that comes through, either in channeling through automatic writing or voice to text or recording yourself. Every iPhone has a voice note mechanism. You can type it into the search and find it, and just trusting what comes through and just getting used to it. And not being perfect the first 20 times you try, the first 50 times you try, just trying is going to show you all the things. So that act alone of just getting started and trusting what comes through is huge. And getting used to that consistency and seeing what happens is huge. Trusting the little voice that shows up is going to be life-changing. And it doesn't mean you have to go and do what the voice says, but write it down or record it, or however you're keeping track of what your gifts are. Trust, even when I was initially, when energy started coming out of my hands, it was very confused. It was honestly really painful when it started. And I started writing it down because I was trying to understand, why was this happening? What made it stop? What made it, whatever. And so even that, when it was confusing and just painful, I notated, and it helped me develop a relationship to it. Or when I started hearing light language, talk about something that makes you feel totally crazy. You're just hearing frequencies in your head, that when you say it, it makes things better and you can feel light moving through you. I had never even heard of light language, so I felt completely insane. Yeah, light language is wild. So I'm hearing light language right now. It's like a switch that turns on in my brain, and I could say it to everyone. You'd all be freaked out. But I had to start leaning into it to understand it. And so there's this critical period between knowing that something's there or desiring it. There's never going to be, listen, maybe you are a unicorn. I believe you're all unicorns, but it's very unusual to have a desire or an inkling or a sense that something is emerging and go straight into fucking nailing it and you 100% believe it. There's going to be a big old portion in there where you feel crazy. You don't know if it's accurate. You're not sure if it's working. It only worked sometimes. The key is to stick with it, to believe yourself, and to know that if you continue to stick with it, it will emerge. How do I know this is true? Because I know that we are all so much more magical and complex than we are told we are. I know that if we give ourselves the time to not be in our minds and in the identities that we've been given, something miraculous emerges. I believe, and you all believe if you're here on some level, that you are sacred, that you are divine, that you are capable of amazing things. What we're really talking about today is, how do you give yourself the structure, the foundation, and the tools to be able to remember your own power and your own infinite possibility. The only way that we can do it is when we do not identify with the challenges, shortcomings, and beliefs that we were given and inherited, and instead cultivate space and spaciousness to sit in the place of spirit and allow for really high frequency, and remembering to always put a boundary around that, really high frequency energies to work through us and connect with our spirit and not with whatever we think we are. And that's really what this is about. And so the more that we can do that, and the more that we make that part of our life, and the more that we identify with spirit and soul and less with this person, age this gender, with this job from this family, the more we are capable of allowing something else to come through and move with us and through us. So that's really what all these like gimmicks and tools and plans are about. And that's why it's so open to other ways of experiencing it, because you might feel that way when you listen to a particular symphony and that's your meditation, in which case do that. But it's really about learning about how you can step away from your preconceived and inherited notions of what makes you you and step into that place of vast possibility, so that possibility can find you, because you have to be a match for it and you have to be available and be able to receive. Back to some basics here about how do we actually integrate it when it starts to show up for us. I do believe that the way that we receive is really helpful. If you are someone who can receive lying down, it sounds so much dirtier than I thought it would. If you are able to like meditate lying down without falling asleep, then you can do that. For me, I find sitting up, there's a reason why, all the Buddhist philosophies say sit up with a straight spine and chin slightly tucked, because you're opening your energy, you're opening your chakras, and you're in alignment. I think that can be really helpful. But finding the position that allows you to feel alert and receptive is really key. Setting intentions, of course, really helpful. You have to be comfortable. If the entire time you're thinking that your foot is asleep, that's not great. That's not going to be great for reception. And again, I want to just restate that when you do set that time up for yourself, giving yourself a buffer ahead of time, like don't try and meditate after answering 20 emails. You're just going to meditate on those emails, unless you're going to meditate for like 90 minutes, knowing that at least the first 15 minutes of your meditation is going to be pure trash. It's just going to be you. That's like always. It doesn't matter even if you've like just woken up. The first 10 to 15 minutes of meditation is usually you just being an insane gonzo in your own brain, and knowing that that's part of the process and letting it do that. So also just throwing that out there. And then the last thing that I want to say in terms of how to actually pull this in is that you cannot channel or access or be a vessel or intuit anything if you are not present. I'm going to say it one more time. You cannot bring anything in, and you cannot actually hear it, receive it, hold it, or share it if you are not present. And that's one of the reasons why meditation is so important. Because if you're in the past, you can't hear shit. And if you're in the future, well, you're already gone. And so meditation is about getting present. It's about being with the moment. That's where everything is going to come through. So other ways of getting present that can be helpful as well are slowing things down. Like if you're doing the dishes, slow it down to half speed, and like really feel everything. You can literally start to hear crazy shit or see crazy shit or feel energy or things like that, or intuit when you start to do things that purposely slow you down and get you physically present, because you're out of your mind in a good way. Okay. So the last chapter of this if anyone has questions, you're always welcome. I have a question here. How do you discern and sift through the information you get from different modalities, such as Akashic records and intuition? How do you discern? I mean, as in like discern where it's coming from, or discern whether you should believe it or not? Because
discern whether you should believe it or not. Because I feel like this whole year I've gone through so many different modalities and different learnings from different teachers, and trying to pull what resonates and sift it through my intuition. And sometimes you get reoccurring answers you can never change, such as all of the information that you're giving tonight. And then there's other pieces I've sat with, like after getting a Akashic records reading, where after a couple months I'm like, well, it could be the reader, or it could be like, I don't know, I just don't want this like new age spiritual bypassing thing to start sneaking into my practice. So that's what I mean by discernment, is like making sure there's, I don't know. I feel like I have had like star being experiences and past life readings and different things with plant medicine with the stars, and then there's other times where I go into like deep witchcraft with like the earth element, and then all of that seems to like change. So I guess I'm still like trying to build my personal cosmology.
What a thoughtful question. I love this question so much. It's one of the hardest things to be with in this process, especially in the process in between, which is lengthy and honestly, oftentimes the majority of the process. Because I don't know, I've been an energy healer for a long time, and sometimes I'm still like, do you feel it? Is it okay? And I know that I know what I'm doing and I can feel it, and I still need validation sometimes. So a couple things come to mind. When it comes to trusting information that's come through from yourself, oof, yeah, I can even feel some weird energies coming in to try and answer. This is this is interesting. Ooh. Okay, when it comes to trusting information that's coming through from yourself, I have found that sometimes you know right away. Before we get into this, I want to first of all state that this is an experience of trusting spirit and a parallel experience of trusting yourself, which makes it really challenging at times. If you have a history of being doubted or your experience of being gaslit, then doing any type of spiritual work where you're learning how to trust and access your own gifts, twice as hard. And that is an entire meta emotional experience that needs to be tended to and cared for. And also, learning to access your gifts that are emerging or have merged is one of the most healing things that you can do, because you are relearning what trust means and what you mean, which is, it's heavy, right? We're talking about so many levels. So trust, first and foremost, in terms of yourself, is critical. And if you yourself, this is just my experience of this. So part of it is also just me doing the caveat of this is my experience and your experience will be different because it's you. For me, when I am channeling or bringing information or accessing, sometimes I immediately know. And I'm sure you do too. Sometimes there are times where you're like, holy shit. And there we are. Got it. Sometimes, and that's about, to me, what like usually like specific questions like, what do I do? How do I handle this thing? And you'll get an answer that you're like, holy shit, I never even thought that was a possibility. And that's so right. And thank God I asked, or whatever. For the times, because clearly you're asking for the times that you don't know, or if the information is not easily verifiable or one that's acted on. For myself, what I do if I'm the one that's bringing the information in is I put it somewhere and I come back to it and I call in other guides that I wasn't connected to that time. So I do a bit of a cross reference, and I see how that feels. The other thing that I do is that I notice in myself what energies connect with that information. As in, so say I write something down about my brother, and I don't know, my relationship with my brother and our importance together, whatever. And if I am feeling really good and I'm feeling really clear and I'm feeling really connected, and that information doesn't feel 100% like it's missing something, and I return to it when I'm feeling like, oh, I'm feeling okay, but I'm like really in my head and I'm really in my day, it kind of shows me that maybe it's a little bit connected to my identity or my needs or my wants, and less about the truth or what might be helpful. So I kind of cross-reference with my own moods. And sometimes I let something be. I just let it be, knowing and trusting that clarity will come. And sometimes I make an intention around, can I get clarity around this? If it's something that requires action right away, I will, and it's something that I have been, that like I'm really circling around. I tend to, this isn't my proudest moment. I tend to really like, I'll like pull the emergency lever and I'll have like a big fucking like, I mean, I'm talking like really like, I need to do something. I need answers now. I need to do this right now. I'll like work myself up into a tizzy. I'll call everyone in. I'll be a crazy person about it. I call all my guides in and I'm like, I want answers now. And I get really like, I mean, that's a different type of channel, but I like kind of put all my shit out there. I like get it all out and then I get really quiet. And I have to get it out so that I can even be quiet, because I can create my own resistance from what I want or from how I'm feeling or my own desperation. And so that's a way for me to kind of burn through my own experience to be able to hear what's on the other side of it. So that's tends to be, if I'm doing it myself, that tends to be it. I'll do a series of channels if I'm not 100% clear on it, and I'll notice what things are common across them and what things might have shifted. And then, yeah, I will do, if it's really serious or I'm really fed up or I'm like really struggling, I have to like get it all out physically so that I can actually hear the truth. I have to tire my brain out or my body out to the point where the truth is what's left. So I don't know if that helps for that. In terms of, gosh, I mean, in terms of the hearing guidance from other people and not knowing if it's true, I hear this so much. Not like I hear this from other people, although yes, but like I have grappled with this, especially in the beginning, so much. I had like the best Akashic Records person give me a reading, and they were everyone's favorite and all this shit. And she's great. And she said some shit that blew my mind. And then she said some shit that I was like, that's not true. It's like, that's not true. And I was really curious about that. And then I was like, am I only believing what I want to believe? And what I've learned is that the things that didn't resonate, they didn't resonate the second I heard them. I knew that when she said this one thing, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Because to me, I have three feelings when I'm hearing someone give me a reading. One is, holy shit, they got it. Two is, I don't understand that, and I'm going to have to come back to that. And that one usually means that it's not clear yet, and have patience. Because usually that shit shows up and I'm like, oh my God, when you randomly are like, what? Wait a minute. And then the third one is, I don't think that's true. And when it comes to the I don't think that's true, it's interesting. I mean, we are humans who are interpreting what we can. And, I don't know how, are they using symbolism? Are they channeling with words? How that can happen. And it does. I mean, that's the process we're in. We're in the process of discernment. And we have to, at the end of the day, be the stewards of what we choose to act upon and what we allow into our systems. And to me, it's about resonance and practicing trust and returning and getting to a place of clarity where when we revisit it, how do we access it and how does it feel? And it's unfortunate and uncomfortable because it requires energy and commitment and like returning to a thing. But I think that even that can be really beautiful in terms of fine-tuning our own instrument of deep listening and reception. It's just really inconvenient, and doubt is going to piggyback on this entire experience. It really is. Doubt's going to always be there. And the question is, can we develop enough of a practice and enough spaciousness in ourselves where we can be with those moments of doubt and let them have their space and not say no, 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 and then revisit it and come to clarity within our own practices. Things that I do not recommend, and I love my pendulum and I love things like that. Using your pendulum for clarity, I do not recommend it, because your pendulum's going to respond unless you're using it on another person's energy body and you are very neutral and that's a practice. Your pendulum's going to tell you whatever you want to feel in that moment. I know you didn't bring up a pendulum, but I know it's a really common thing as like the ultimate like deal breaker decider. And I've seen that go awry. So yeah, I'm gonna reread this from different information in Akashic Records. Yeah, intuition. The only other thing is trusting your intuition is a really important part of this. I can't believe this wasn't in my notes. It's a really interesting part, is that you're gonna be wrong. You're gonna be wrong. There are gonna be times where you're gonna be wrong, and that doesn't mean that you're not usually right. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep going. And it doesn't mean that it isn't valuable. It also doesn't mean that you're entirely wrong, because everything is shifting and nothing is what it seems. But not holding it so tight and seeing this as a curious inspiration is going to help. But yeah, I hear you. When you call, when you have, I've had psychics tell me some stuff where I was like, that was such a bold thing to say incorrectly. Like, what a wild thing. I'm gonna have twins. That's an insane thing to say to me right now. Like, in like the next month, like, I know I'm not gonna get pregnant with twins. What a wild suggestion. But I think we just have to kind of sit with uncertainty at times and befriend the curiosity and stick with it. I also think that it's trickier when we're using other people as guides who aren't in conversation. Like, when I work with someone, I'm literally in their energy field. I'm asking them questions and I'm working with them, and we're like literally working together to get to the core of it. There are times where people have readings where they just talk all the way through. It's common. It's just trickier because if you've started to depart, they're not feeling into it. And now you guys are like, you're like two train tracks that are like, and so working with yourself is a different type of process that I think is a really beautiful one. And then getting used to indecision and returning to it, knowing that you haven't failed yourself and that actually you're in a process of deeper knowing yourself can be such an enormous part of the work. And then also the last thing I'll say about that, unless you have further questions, is there can be a difference between, especially when it comes to guidance, what your guides, your teachers, your ancestors, what your plant spirits, your compassionate star family, they can all want different things for you. And that can cause a lot of incongruences. So, for me, some really clear ways of getting to the heart of that is to call in your higher self and to kind of cut out everyone else, and for a little bit and with gratitude, and then call in your higher self and find out what's actually true for you in this moment, which is a really different question, because the Akashic records are like insane. It's like, what are you even fucking pulling from? The fucking history of everything? Then it's all true because there's a million fucking timelines, and what are we even talking? It's like so vast that it's almost hard to slim down. So calling in your higher self and getting really clear with the question, getting even clearer than your original question, can be really illuminating. I hope was that helpful, or do you have any other questions around that?
No, I think that was very well covered and exactly what I was looking for, because especially the reading was pre-recorded and then just kind of told
Oh,
to me
really?
in like a 2-hour list, like here's all the stuff.
Wow.
And so it was interesting because then, we did of course have the moments where it felt like we were on the same timeline discussing the same thing. And then there was other times, this was kind of earlier in the year before I had really started working with my ancestors and helping guides on my own. And so when she was saying, that I had like a half horse woman was my guide, I'm just like, well, I guess that was one of those things where, as you beautifully put it, I want to just put that on the back for now, and just if
Yeah.
it needs to be known later, cool, but I don't think right now it had brought me anything I was
Yeah.
needing. And so I guess it just comes back to the point of clarity, which is like, well, then why did I choose to ask that? And I think it was just out of, the same classic thing everyone deals with, where it was just desperation of wanting,
Sure.
like, who's my guy? Like, you just want all of these answers rather than doing the work of just sitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you never know when your centaur goddess guide's going to come find you. And I cannot wait for that moment for you. And then you'll be like, wow, they nailed it.
Yeah,
Um,
there she is. So
there
thank you.
she
That was great.
Good. I'm so glad it was helpful. So real quick, just on how to act with, on your gifts and how to do that safely and in a supportive way, because your gifts are here now. What do you do? First and foremost, believe in your experiences, like we just discussed, and hold them loosely, lovingly, but loosely, so that you can still be curious. Another really key thing is do not tell unsupportive people in your life. Like, this sounds obvious, but especially if you had like a really beautiful moment, one of the fastest ways that it can be ruined is by telling someone who doesn't believe you, shits on your experience, is disregarding you, or questions it. That is like learning who your people are and who you can talk to about this is so, so crucial. If you do not have anyone in your life who can hear that, you're always welcome to reach out to me. You can always talk to me. I have like a whole thing on just free calls. But really, regardless, find someone who wants to hear this, can hear it, knows how to encourage it, because it's the fastest way to just break your heart after you've had an experience or multiple experiences that you're excited about and that feel really sacred. And always find other like-minded people who you can share it with and who can answer your questions and build off of it. And like give guidance, or like, oh, I have an idea. That will be a really, really helpful way to keep a safe container. And then I'm going to answer this one question. If for anyone who wants to reach out to me who has any questions, I'm going to give you my direct email. And then I just started a little Instagram handle for things like this. So, so I'm going to put that in here. I have another point to make, but I'm going to forget this, and someone just asked for my info. Okay. And then I think my website is somewhere up here, but I can put that in, and that just shares more about the other stuff that I do. Okay. And my last big point before we open it up for questions, I'm so sorry this has gone so long, is that you are already a channel. You're already a medium. You already have the gifts. I spent so long thinking, what is like the perfect constellation of things that I have to do for like a lightning bolt to hit me at the right direction for this to all make sense and come through clearly. And you literally already have it. And there's a really beautiful thing and a really negative thing about this. I'm going to start with the negative thing. The negative thing about the fact that you are already a channel, you are already gifted, you are already have access to all of these things, is that it means that it's just up to you to do the work. That means that you have to make the changes. That means you have to do the committed practice. That means that you need to be someone who's open and committed to this and is able to hold this information and practice this. So that's like the worst part of it. I called when Amanda was asking, like, psychics, Akasha record readings, I did all of this. Exactly. Amanda's already saying my ADHD says boo, but I know I already did all this because I could feel them emerging. And all I wanted was for a psychic to be like, oh, yes, you are a starseed and you are, Isis is this. And here's the thing, they'll tell you that. And that's great. But it's not actually going to kind of get you there. And most of the time, deep down, that that's actually not the real reason, not the real answer, not the real thing you're looking for, and that you have to find it yourself. And you also know that it doesn't matter, even if it's true. I believe I'm a starseed. I'm one of those people who believes that. I fucking know it. Okay. I've had all kinds of experiences around it. I freaking speak star language. Okay. I have like memories from Atlantis. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if all of that is true, because you have to create the practice and the space and the lifestyle and the commitment to be able to step into those things. And that is why it's already in you. And now it's about you. It's almost like, this is a terrible metaphor and it just found me and I wish I could workshop it longer, but here we go. It's almost like, that there is a beautiful plant buried in fertile soil, and you could, water it and let it bloom. And that's what this practice is. Or you can literally, if it's blooming, like pull the soil around it to give it the space to grow. I know that's not how plants grow. And that's why I immediately was like, terrible metaphor, Allison, but I went through it anyway. It's literally about creating the conditions for it to come through. Wanting someone to come down and like pull the fucking plant through and the flowers through and make it bloom, it's not going to work. That's not how this works. You could bust it through your psyche and be clinically insane for a year. And also the likelihood of that working is very, very minimal. And it means you have to like blast your Kundalini open, like someone in this beautiful call has already done, or get so zooted to high heaven on plant medicine that you may never return. Not recommended. And you literally can't figure it out after that anyway. This is a practice. It's already in you. You're already divine. You already have. You're trying to open your third eye. It's open. If it wasn't, you'd be dead. So it's about giving yourself the conditions for it to blossom and for it to grow. And that means if you want to have these gifts, you kind of have to become a professional gardener a little bit and learn about what your specific makeup needs and how you can nurture it into fruition so that you can step into your power and you can access those emergent parts of your spirit that are gently knocking on the glass of your psyche, being like, hello, can we step in here now? We'd really like to be a part of what you've got going on here. But it's about the practice, it's about the consistency, it's about the patience, and it's about the belief in yourself that you can do it, and that you are going to see the process through, even when it's confusing, and always reaching out to like-minded folks in the process who can help see the path for you when it's too obfuscated, for you to believe in it yourself. And that will happen. There will be times where you're too confused or scared or frustrated, and you will need someone else who's far enough away from it to see the path and say, oh, no, sweetheart, you are just on that really murky part, and it's about to get really clear. Keep going. So that is this giant download of different things that you can do to help access your gifts. I hope it was so helpful. I am so open for any questions that you might have. I would love to answer them. And also I can stop the recording and you're welcome to ask after we stop recording. Does anyone have anything they want to add or anything that they want to share or ask? Okay, I'm going to stop recording. Here we go.